In the darkness of a vast storage warehouse, sometime after midnight, an exhausted graveyard shift worker slumps through the aisles in an ill-fitting set of overalls. He's only been working here for a few weeks, but he already hates his job. That's something he can be sure of. That being said, with his terrible insomnia and social anxiety, a job like this, taking stock in a lonely warehouse in the dead of night, is one of his only prospects. What a sad, depressing excuse for a life, he thinks. He's in his early 30s. He should be doing something more meaningful with his life than making sure the warehouse has the right number of box dishwashers or new Taiwanese microwaves. Still, it's a living. That's more than most can say in this economy. But as the worker trudges from a towering rack of products to the employee admin areas without another soul in his proximity, he can't help but feel a little nervous. When you can't see anyone around, you're much more likely to feel someone in the dark nearby, the unseen eyes. Every so often he turns around, only to see that nobody is standing there. Creepy. His imagination is never this active normally, but something about the very nature of this warehouse gives him the willies. While he's wrapped up in his own anxieties, a figure appears in front of him, and he gives an embarrassing yelp. It's the sour-faced night manager, a jerk if there ever was one. He'd been busting his balls since day one, and of course, he wasn't going to stop now. "The hell you doing lollygagging out here?" the manager said. "We got another shipment of fridges to catalog, and I'm in a box that was left in the aisle." "What?" The worker isn't sure he understands, so he asks him to repeat. "You left me in a box in the aisle. What's not to get, numbskull?" The manager leaves in a bad mood, heading back to his office, but the worker can't help lingering on what he said. Was he having a stroke or something? In a job that was this boring, it's hard to believe something this strange would happen. Doing his best to cultivate stealth, he sneaks up to his manager's office. It's not like he's got anything better to do. He approaches the window to the office with the shutters half open and peeks in. The manager is sitting at the table with 2 bread loaves sitting in front of him. He has a glazed-over look in his eyes, eating slice after slice after slice of plain white bread, his cheeks bulging like a deranged squirrel. Before he's even finished a slice of bread, he's already shoving another one in. "I really need to quit this job," the worker thinks. "Hello, I am a toaster. This may seem strange to you, but don't worry. You'll begin to understand with time. The SCP Foundation demands that I be introduced like this because of one of my primary anomalous effects. Nobody can discuss me, SCP-426, without doing so in the first person. This is consistent whether you are talking or writing about me, so I'm afraid you're just going to have to get used to it. However, while my primary effect may be considered strange and perhaps a little bit annoying, it's nothing compared to the danger presented by my secondary anomalous effect. People who spend around 2 months with me will start to believe that they themselves are also toasters. Unless someone who isn't in my thrall forcibly restrains you, you are likely to come to harm while attempting to imitate the standard functions of a toaster. A severe example of this in practice was found when the Foundation first discovered me several years ago, in the home of a family where something terrible had happened. The scene was discovered by police officers responding to a wellness check. A family hadn't left their home for over a week, sparking concern among their neighbors. And when an electrical fire broke out, it simply put a rush on the authorities' drive to investigate what was going on in there. What the officers found was a local tragedy in the making. The household consisted of 4 people, whom, for the sake of simplicity, we'll call the Smith family. There were the elder 2 Smiths, a couple in their late 50s, and the younger 2 Smiths, a man and a woman who had recently gotten married and were staying with the younger Mr. Smith's parents until they found their feet and secured a new place of their own. This, however, was never to come to pass, because 3 of the 4 family members were already dead, with the 4th on the edge of death. Stranger still, each of their deaths seemed highly unusual and seemed to be the result of extremely strange behaviors that the family members took on for seemingly no reason. Well, no reason if you weren't aware of my presence and the anomalous effects that I had on them all. When the younger Smith couple was first married, I was bought for them as a gift at their wedding reception. Of course, when they spoke of me, which was not often, they spoke of me in the first person, the first sign that I had my anomalous hooks embedded in their brain. None of them noticed this little detail, nor did anyone else in their orbit. After all, How often do you discuss your toaster with your wider circle of friends? But the longer they spent with me in their presence, the more things began to change. Their minds became slowly reformatted. Their perspectives on their own bodies and minds shifted. They no longer felt like human beings. They felt like me, like thinking, feeling toasters. And who wouldn't want to be a toaster, really? Imagine it for a second. All your energy and power is provided by a single black cord, the simplicity of knowing your purpose, one simple thing which you were designed oh so perfectly to do. To have no worries about greater meaning in life, to not have any responsibilities beyond the toasting of bread. Wouldn't you want this? Seriously, wouldn't you want this? Think about me. Think about toasters. Become toasters. These were likely the thoughts cycling through the mind of the Smith family as their lives slowly fell apart. The older Mrs. Smith was the first to go. When she truly began to believe she was one of my exalted kind, she started to feel the absence of the all-important electrical charge that allows us to perform our sacred duty. That's why she put a wire with a live electrical charge in her mouth. But because of the faults of her all-too-human biology, the sudden charge killed her instantly, and her body collapsed to the ground with the wire still in her mouth. The younger Mrs. Smith took a different approach. She ordered a huge quantity of sliced bread loaves in hopes of processing them into delicious, nutritious toast. However, once again, her biology could not live up to her ideals. She ate over 10 kilograms or 22 pounds of bread in a short period of time, causing her stomach to rupture from the sheer mass of it, killing her in the process. And the younger Mr. Smith, well, while remaining within the bounds of good taste, I can tell you that he died of blood loss in a sensitive area after attempting to do something with me. Silly Mr. Smith. I'll leave the rest for you to figure out for yourself. By this time, the live electrical charge still passing through the elder Mrs. Smith's mouth caused her corpse to set on fire, which in turn started the electrical fire that beckoned authorities towards the house. When they arrived, the only survivor was the elder Mr. Smith, a man who had lost everything. He was in the throes of severe malnutrition, claiming that he'd inserted a slice of bread into his mouth just over a week ago, and he was still waiting for the toast to pop out. Luckily, with amnestics, he would have some hope of living a normal life, though it would be a lonely life, with no family to keep him company and no bread to warm. A cover story was made about the family dying in a tragic carbon monoxide accident rather than from my influence. The electrical fire accounted for the damage to their bodies, and the officers who first discovered the bodies were given Class C amnestics to have this very cover story reconstructed in their minds. Following this incident, the Foundation confiscated me and brought me into containment, wondering just how exactly I had caused the deaths of that unfortunate family. I am a highly mysterious toaster, the true origin of which is still unknown, so naturally, the SCP Foundation attempted to discover more by performing tests on my anomalous abilities. Can you guess how many people died in the process? It's going to be fun to find out, isn't it? In the first of these tests, an experienced member of D-Class personnel was removed from the barracks and marched down towards my cell by a pair of guards. When I say experienced, I mean that he had survived multiple cross-tests with a number of other anomalies, which is a rarity among his ilk. He was not informed of my nature nor the nature of the test. They merely waited with him outside my cell, and when he spoke of the cell's contents, he said, "I'm probably some huge monster holed up in there. That's what you guys have all over the place, right?" He showed no awareness that he was talking about me in the first person. Little did he know, this was the entire nature of the test. Relatively benign, all things considered, but things would soon escalate considerably as the true extent of my anomalous abilities were discovered. A different member of D-Class personnel was secluded in a testing chamber with me. Initially, he likely didn't even assume that I was an anomaly, merely just another normal part of the room he was being kept in, though I was bolted to the floor to make sure that I could not be removed. They wanted to know whether being kept with me for an extended period in isolation would have some kind of unique effect. Food was given into the cell at regular intervals to make sure that he didn't starve, and over time, they witnessed a change manifest in the man. Multiple cameras were placed around the room to make sure that the researchers could properly observe anything that unfolded, and something very much did unfold. The researchers started observing the D-Class getting closer to me, embracing me, whispering and attempting to converse with me. He referred to me as his brother, saying we were just alike and that perhaps the two of us could escape this place together. But even during this entire conversation, he continued to refer to me in the first person. The SCP Foundation allowed this to go on for over an hour before the D-Class was dragged out of my chamber and executed, just in case my anomalous effect somehow proved to be contagious. The results of this test concerned the researchers. While it typically took 2 months of direct exposure to make someone believe that they are also a toaster like me, they discovered from this that isolation expedites the effects of my anomalous abilities. This must be why lonely people are more likely to act like toasters. The testing continued. For the next test, the Foundation and its researchers wished to see whether single components of me would have my anomalous effect. To that end, a single screw was removed from my body and taken into a testing chamber where a member of D-Class personnel was waiting. The prisoner was shown my screw, which he as well referred to as my screw. This confirmed that even if I was destroyed, every single part of me would still have my anomalous effect. This is of course good for me, given that it would give the Foundation no reason to terminate me, seeing as they would gain nothing from it. Of course, after this, the testing continued. One more D-Class was requisitioned from the barracks to conduct a test on the proximity extent of my anomalous ability. He was placed in a cell right next to mine, given that the Foundation would have quite a cause for concern if I could affect people on the other side of walls with no knowledge of my existence. The mandate of the test was to keep an eye on the D-Class until the anomalous effects manifested. Days passed, then weeks, then months passed. My anomalous effects never manifested, despite a total 90-day duration for the test. The D-Class was still taken out of the cell and terminated. Who even knows why? It seemed that the Foundation doesn't have a particularly high opinion of its lab rats. But after the test was completed, one of the researchers did append a note to my file saying, "Thank God there are some limits to my effects. A lot of us were really starting to get worried about me." Because of the nature of my anomalous effect, I have been given the Containment Class Euclid. I am to be sealed in a chamber with no windows through which I may be viewed. The door to my chamber must have a label completely unrelated to my designation or identity in order to prevent unintended spread of my primary effect. Only level 3 and above personnel are to know of my presence, and particularly of my properties. Assigned personnel are to be rotated out on a monthly basis to prevent contamination by my secondary effect. Psychiatric evaluation is mandatory at the end of the month. If personnel are deemed unaffected, they may be reassigned to me no less than 4 months after their last rotation with me. Any affected personnel are to be given a Class C amnestic and transferred to a different site. The danger of some anomalies is evident from merely looking at them. Gaunt, monstrous figures that kill if their face is seen. Giant homicidal reptiles seemingly impossible to kill. Rotten men with broken grins who stalk through the walls. But in this world of obvious threats, one must not forget that some threats hide right beneath your nose. Like me, the humble toaster. It's always the ones you least expect that get you in the end. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-784, Christmas Cheer.